How are we all doing? I hope you're all doing well. You are well, and then you can have access to it. Just drop an emoji in the chat box. Oh, Christian says it's interesting. Yes, and also we also want to know how far. Let's go. Yeah, there's price on the certificate, and also provide language. And what we are doing is that we want to engage our wonderful. So if you haven't joined that one, just to be sure that we are not missing a professional development certificate. It's good to always have knowledge on what is. Sure, you have seen it around. Is on how can translators balance cultural sensitivity with personal beliefs when translating LGBTQ related documents. Now, in our African context, we realize that translators find themselves usually navigating, a really complex, right, and there are others that continue to hold their views that clash with the global human rights standards. But today, what we are going to be doing is to, give you different social contexts in different today. And I'm sure you have seen them already. They have their cameras turned on. We have Patient in the house. We have Isabella. We have pushed the floor to Patient to introduce himself to the participants. Patient, you are welcome once again.
Thanks a lot for accepting me here, dear Rebecca. Nice to meet you. As I was saying a couple of minutes ago, I'm eager to meet you in person. Definitely, we had a lot of, it's not just a profession, it's a passion for me. And I love crafting content that resonates with varied and feel free to ask anything. And I'm ready to share my presentation.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and it's great to know that you are ready to share. Our sweet panel of speakers today is Isabella.
In my previous life, I was a translator, a freelance translator. Trained is because I live in the Netherlands, and LGBTQIA issues are almost non-existent. So, but Rebecca convinced me, and we found an angle of my presentation that I hope.
Christian also provided wonderful insight during our discussion on the Mati community. That is why he's here. So we always advise that, members of the Mati community, we engage with posts that is put on there so that when it comes to issues like this,
the topic objectively and also learn from others' experience. I believe that among the participants also many of us.
So for the first part of our KLS talk, what we are going to be doing is to be listening to the presentations of these contribute to this topic. So we are going to dive right into the presentation. We are going to start with Patient first. Patient is going to take the floor and then start with his presentation. Afterwards, we are going to have this.
I will move on. The first thing I would like to say is that translators, as we are all here, translators, interpreters, this is a generic term that can be applied to even interpreters, terminologists, and everyone else in the localization industry. Translators are open-minded professionals, gays, bisexuals, transgenders, and queers, but as Isabella rightly mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, there are so many other statuses that can be added to it. That's why the new term is LGBTQ+, because there are asexuals, there are intersexuals, and all of them. The LGBTQ term or movement encompasses several gender identities, sexual orientation, put in quote, because these are now outdated term in the LGBT milieu, where they prefer the LGBTQ term we are talking about. So the other term we're discussing is the term cultural sensitivity, which is defined by the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare as the willingness, ability, and sensitivity required to understand people with different backgrounds, providing cultural nuances and avoid misrepresentations or stereotypes. And we'll see later on why it's important to avoid such misrepresentations and stereotypes, because the LGBTQ is globally, many people tend to generalize everything related to the LGBTQ. So the third term, we're going to talk about his or her values. And that also is to be taken into consideration as a professional. Because before being professionals, we are first of all human beings. The fourth term is professional ethics. Professional ethics are principles that govern the behavior of a person or group in a business environment. And in the localization industry, commitment to ethics involves, among others, has a human dimension, a personal dimension when we translate. So now, what are some practical steps we would like to recommend for people who want to navigate or to balance cultural sensitivity, professional ethics with personal beliefs when dealing with LGBTQ-related documents? From my own perspective and my own experience, I noticed that the LGBTQ content can be divided into it seems to be to engage to have a minimum to zero personal engagement in general. We mention in general because people vary and their nature may vary as well. But in general, when someone deals with neutral LGBTQ content, the personal engagement is zero or so. LGBTQ content has to do with texts that tend to recruit some adepts. So it's very important for a translator or a linguist to know these various categories, because the various categories and the personal engagement that they imply will also help him or her identify if they are willing to take one task or another. And that's why the first step is getting acquainted with the categories of LGBTQ content and their respective levels of personal engagement on the level of personal engagement it involves. The Dalai Lama said, open your arms to change. African environment, we should be open to that change, even if we stick to our values. And James A. Garfield says, the men who succeed best in public life are those who take the risk of standing by their own convictions. So after considering in which category a text belongs to, you have to do it by asking the client an except or the balance while translating to remain ethical, to commit to ethics. Then it will be better for you to not be afraid to say politely to the client that please. And if you are ready to take it, of course, you have to be courageous as well to accept it, no matter the category we saw earlier. Now, the third step, when you have accepted a task, ensure accurate and unoffensive renditions depending on the context. For instance, we have put the references at the end of our presentation. In LGBTQ context, you should avoid outdated terms. Initially in my presentation, I talk about homosexuality, which is no longer the term in use. Instead, gender expression, transsexualism, but gender incongruence, biological or real male or female, no, this is no more applicable. We talk about cisgender, and gender queer is outdated, and we talk about non-binary. So that is one of the things that we should master, male or female, to handle such a task, or so that you are a professional, a real professional. And also, the next step when you accept the job is that you should search and also the best existing equivalents in the target area, several lifestyles, identities, and realities. So now, how to identify the right approach to render the LGBTQ term in an African language? Maybe what we may suggest is that you should identify what is it talking about, what does the term refer in appropriate way to render it in the given target language. And at times they will imply coining a new and not a new non-offensive term, because in several African cultures and languages, LGBT text. So the last way of showcasing utmost professionalism and commitment to ethics when you translate to address the the target base in Cameroon, I will tell him that in Cameroon, the LGBTQ rights
Je
are
lui dirais
not...
qu'au Cameroun, les droits LGBTQ.
Okay. So the LGBTQ rights, sorry, I listened to the interpreter at that time and this interrupted me a bit. A solution or to appear as an expert for my client, I can discuss several translation options with the client to avoid culturally. I would like to share this Bible quote from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 17, part A, where it says in the New World Translation of Holy Scriptures, honor men of all sorts. And in the today's English version, it says respect everyone, which means that whether within or beyond the bounds of our professional engagements. So I'm ready for any questions, and many thanks to Kabod Language Services for contacting me for this presentation. I hope it brought some interesting aspects that we will be able to discuss later on. We can network anytime, anywhere. I'm on LinkedIn.
Presentation, it really was. What really stood out for me was the quote from Dalai Lama that we should open our arms to change, but we shouldn't let go of our values. As translators, yes, we have our personal beliefs. And I'm sure we have learned something from the presentation of patients. There's a question. So if they help them, that is like they accept LGBTQ. So I think what it's trying to say is, what do you
be it a Muslim or any religion, I'm a Jehovah, likely to translate it. I think it's possible to translate because you are helping those people to be included, to accept it or not, as they are free to choose their sexual life. Doesn't mean I'm supporting what is being doing there. For instance, you can be translating a document about have to be courageous enough to say, no, please, this one is not mine. It's not my cup of tea. Please, I would decline.
You are welcome to do that. We want to hear from everyone before we take the next presentation. Our time is moving very fast, so we are going to be listening to Isabella. So yes, I think let's welcome her with some. Let's make the chat box fun. Let's just not just be there, be silent. I mean, drop some clapping emojis for her in the chat box as she's
strategist at Gala. But before that, in my previous life, I was a freelance translator. I was born in Italy, and then after finishing my studies in 1988, I moved to the Netherlands. Differences. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how I had to navigate that. And I'll also say something about the LGBTQ issues, of course. So I moved to the Netherlands in 1998, very important year for politics, for the IT sector, and else. So besides learning the language, I had to learn it's present everywhere and it has an impact on our lives. But in the Netherlands, we have a secular society. So there are Catholics, there are Protestants, there are many varieties of Protestant churches you can find.